Lionel Messi scored a hat-trick tonight, his first in World Cup history. He tied the all-time World Cup scoring record. He tore apart Algeria at Arrowhead Stadium in Kansas City, with the kind of brilliance that has defined 2 full decades of the beautiful game. By any measure, it was one of the greatest individual performances in the history of this tournament. But tonight's story is not just about the goals. Tonight's story is about a moment in the first half that every neutral in that stadium witnessed, that every camera in the building captured, and that the referee, backed by the same VAR technology that FIFA has spent billions of dollars promoting as the definitive answer to officiating controversy, decided simply did not happen. Messi caught Issa Mandi high on the shin with his boot in the 41st minute, with Argentina trailing the pace of the match, and nothing was done about it. No foul was called. No review was triggered. The game moved on. What followed was a hat trick, a record, a standing ovation, and a global social media explosion that split the football world directly down the middle. On one side stood the hundreds of millions of fans who watched the greatest player of all time produce a performance for the ages, and decided that tonight belonged purely to genius. On the other side, a growing chorus of voices, from Algeria, from football analysts across Europe, from supporters organizations, and from people who have watched this tournament slowly accumulate controversies like a storm gathering clouds, asking one question that will only get louder in the hours and days ahead. Would that challenge have gone unpunished if the player who committed it was not Lionel Messi? Let us be precise about what actually happened in the first half of Argentina's opening match at the 2026 World Cup, played at Kansas City before a crowd that had come to witness history. Messi went into a challenge with Algerian defender Issa Mandi. His boot connected with Mandi's shin, high. That is exactly the kind of contact that, under the current laws of the game, carries at minimum a serious foul, and at maximum, depending on force and point of contact, a potential red card under the violent conduct provisions that FIFA itself has been emphasizing more heavily in this tournament than at any previous edition. Referee Szymon Mariniak did not stop play. The VAR team, watching every frame from every available camera angle in real time, did not intervene. The match continued. Messi remained on the pitch, and 17 minutes into that same game, he opened the scoring with a trademark left foot strike that sent the stadium into delirium. The reaction from Algeria was immediate and visceral. Their players swarmed the referee in the moments immediately following the challenge. The Algerian bench responded with the unmistakable body language of people who cannot believe what they just saw, calculating in real time that there is nothing they can do about it. By the time Messi put the ball in the net for the first time, the Algerian players understood they were competing not just against the defending world champions, but against something larger than the 11 men standing across from them. That feeling is not new to teams that face Messi, but tonight it carried a weight that history lends it, because this is not the first time this question has been raised about this player at this stage of the competition. It is not the first time a decision involving Lionel Messi at a World Cup generated accusations of differential treatment. And it is not the first time that the combination of Messi, a critical match, and an officiating call produced a controversy that outlasted the 90 minutes by days and weeks. Because what adds an entirely new dimension to tonight's controversy is a name that has been at the center of this exact same debate for months: Cristiano Ronaldo. In November of last year, during a World Cup qualifying match between Ireland and Portugal in Dublin, Ronaldo drove his elbow into the back of defender Dara O'Shea. The challenge was initially punished with a yellow card. VAR upgraded it to a red after review. Under FIFA's own disciplinary code, violent conduct of that nature carries a mandatory minimum 3-match suspension. By the letter of the law, Ronaldo should have missed Portugal's final qualifying match and their first 2 games at the 2026 World Cup. FIFA's disciplinary committee convened. Their verdict stunned the football world. The 3-match ban was reduced to 1. The remaining 2 matches were suspended under a 1-year probationary period. Their official reasoning centered on the fact that it was Ronaldo's first international red card in a career spanning 226 appearances for Portugal. A clean record, they argued, mitigated the punishment. multiple national football associations immediately began exploring whether the decision could be legally challenged. Analysts across the sport described it as an institution bending its own rules to protect its most commercially valuable asset. The timing could not have been more damaging for FIFA's credibility. Months before the tournament even kicked off, the governing body had already answered the question of whether its biggest stars operate under the same disciplinary standards as everyone else. It had answered that question clearly in writing, and the answer was no. And now, tonight in Kansas City, the same question arrived from a different angle. Not from a disciplinary committee deliberating in a conference room, but from a split-second officiating decision in the 41st minute of a World Cup match, under the eyes of thousands inside the stadium, millions watching on television, and a VAR system that FIFA has spent years and vast sums promoting as the definitive solution to referee controversy. The VAR let it slide. Perhaps there is an entirely legitimate technical explanation for why the challenge did not meet the threshold for intervention. Perhaps the angle was ambiguous. Perhaps the contact was lighter than it appeared from the primary camera feed. Perhaps every frame was reviewed with exactly the same scrutiny that would have been applied to any other player in any other match. Perhaps the decision was correct in every technical sense, and the controversy is nothing more than the natural frustration of an Algerian team that conceded 3 goals to one of the greatest players in history. Perhaps. But perhaps is a very uncomfortable word when you are an Algerian footballer who just watched a challenge on your teammate go completely unpunished in a World Cup match that meant everything. What makes tonight's event so layered is the contrast with decisions made elsewhere in this very tournament. The opening match between Mexico and South Africa produced 3 red cards. One of them, the dismissal of South Africa's Themba Zwane for violent conduct after his hand caught a Mexican player's face, was described by multiple respected analysts as a genuinely harsh call. The Brazilian referee Wilton Sampaio reached for the most severe sanction available, supported by VAR, for a contact that many experts said did not clearly meet the violent conduct threshold. Sampaio himself became an unexpected internet sensation when he announced the decision over the stadium microphone under FIFA's new referee communication initiative. A moment that went viral within minutes of the final whistle. In that same tournament, under the same referee guidelines, in a match played just days later, a challenge connecting high on a World Cup defender's shin went completely unaddressed. One decision produced a red card. The other produced nothing. The difference between them was not the clarity of the contact. The difference was the identity of the player who made it. That observation is uncomfortable. It is precisely the kind of observation that organizations like FIFA prefer to dismiss as speculation and emotional reaction, rather than engage with directly. But it is an observation being made tonight not by fringe voices, but by mainstream analysts, by former professional players, and by the kind of calm, evidence-based football observers whose opinions carry genuine weight in the sport. The Ronaldo precedent matters here. When an institution demonstrates through its own formal disciplinary process that its biggest names operate under different rules than everyone else, it removes the benefit of the doubt from every subsequent decision involving those same names. It creates a framework of suspicion that attaches itself to every marginal call, every VAR non-intervention, every moment where the evidence was just ambiguous enough to go either way. And when that institution is also the same one that awarded its inaugural Peace Prize to the sitting president of its host nation, the one that has faced sustained accusations of bending commercial interests into every structural decision about this tournament, and that has responded to the crisis of empty seats, grounded team planes, and deported referees with press statements rather than accountability. The framework of suspicion has already been built long before tonight's match even started. The political context surrounding this tournament cannot be separated from what happened on that pitch tonight. FIFA President Gianni Infantino arrived at this World Cup carrying baggage that would have been unthinkable for any of his predecessors. He was photographed wearing a MAGA cap. He awarded President Donald Trump a so-called FIFA Peace Prize. He joined Trump's Board of Peace, and he did all of this while publicly insisting that politics has no place in sport. Human Rights Watch Director of Global Initiatives, Minky Worden, described the tournament plainly as a sports washing event for the Trump administration, noting that FIFA's willingness to align itself with political power in Washington mirrors exactly the same dynamic that defined its relationship with authoritarian governments in Russia in 2018 and Qatar in 2022. The Guardian reported just weeks before the tournament began that a campaign group called FairSquare had launched what they described as the biggest complaint FIFA has ever received. A class action-style submission accusing Infantino of violating the FIFA Code of Ethics on 4 separate occasions by failing to remain politically neutral. These are not peripheral grievances. These are formal legal challenges filed by serious organizations with documented evidence. And they arrived right as the tournament was kicking off, adding an unmistakable political undercurrent to every controversy that has followed. The financial architecture of this World Cup deepens that context significantly. Fortune magazine reported earlier this month that this tournament is projected to generate $9 billion in revenue under Infantino's leadership, a figure that represents a fundamental transformation of FIFA's commercial scale over the past decade. That level of money does not flow through an institution without shaping its priorities. When you build a $9 billion sporting event around the drawing power of specific players, the commercial calculus of protecting those players from suspension or adverse officiating decisions becomes a pressure that exists whether or not anyone inside the organization ever articulates it out loud. Nobody needs to send a message to a referee. The incentive structure speaks for itself. And when the outcome of that incentive structure looks like what happened in Kansas City tonight, the questions write themselves. There have been other officiating controversies already in this tournament, and they form an important backdrop to tonight's events. During the Switzerland versus Qatar match in Santa Clara, a VAR glitch prevented the offside animation graphic from being broadcast during a controversial penalty decision. FIFA issued an official statement clarifying that the VAR workflow itself was not affected, and that the relevant players were not in an offside position. But the technical failure, however innocuous its actual cause, created genuine confusion among viewers worldwide and produced another round of questions about the reliability of the technology FIFA has staked so much of its credibility on. In the Scotland versus Haiti match, a potential handball in the penalty area went uncalled. A high challenge that appeared to connect above knee height received only a yellow card. VAR reviewed neither. Haiti went home with nothing. Meanwhile, the referee Shaun Evans, who officiated Germany's match against Curaçao in Houston earlier this week, faces a formal scrutiny process after anti-discrimination campaigners accused him of making a hand gesture associated with white supremacist movements during the game. FIFA has not yet announced whether Evans will continue in the tournament's officiating pool. Each of these incidents, taken individually, might be explained away. Taken together, they tell a story about a tournament that has been operationally unstable at the officiating level from the moment the first whistle blew. The Ronaldo situation deserves one more look in light of all this, because the 2026 World Cup is not just the backdrop for one controversy involving a superstar being protected from the full consequences of the rules. Portugal have navigated their group stage matches with Ronaldo fully available, having served his single-match suspension during qualifying. He arrived in North America carrying the benefit of FIFA's own institutional protection, and now Messi has received what looks, from the outside, like the same kind of protection at the match level that Ronaldo received at the disciplinary level. Whether or not that parallel is accurate in a technical sense, it is the parallel that the football world is drawing tonight. And the football world is not entirely wrong to draw it. Lionel Messi now stands level with Miroslav Klose on 16 World Cup goals, needing just one more to stand alone at the summit of the most celebrated individual achievement the tournament offers. The hat trick itself was extraordinary by any standard. The first goal, a left-foot strike of pure instinct from outside the penalty area, was the kind of moment that reminds you why this man has been the subject of conversation for 2 decades. The second was composed opportunism after a spilled save, the kind of clinical finishing that only comes from playing at the highest level for so long that the goal looks almost accidental. The third, a curling low finish into the bottom corner that sent the stadium into a frenzy, was a throwback to his best years in a season where many had genuinely begun to wonder whether those years were behind him. At 38 years old, Messi remains capable of changing the outcome of the biggest football tournament on earth with a single performance. He is still here, he is still extraordinary. But football is not only about what the greatest player does on the pitch. It is also about whether the framework that governs his participation in the sport applies to him with the same consistency it applies to everyone else. And tonight, that framework was tested in front of the entire world. The people inside that stadium who watched Issa Mandi take a boot to the shin looked up at the VAR screen waiting for a review that never came, and then watched the player who committed the challenge score 3 goals in the same match. Those people are entitled to ask whether the answer they got was the one they deserved. The broader picture of FIFA as an institution makes that question even harder to dismiss. The 2015 corruption scandal that ended with 31 guilty pleas and multiple convictions on charges ranging from racketeering to wire fraud to money laundering never fully went away. Then, Attorney General Loretta Lynch described the corruption within FIFA's ranks as rampant, systemic, and deep-rooted. More than a decade later, the organization is being led by a president who wears MAGA caps and gives peace prizes to heads of state, who has overseen the awarding of the 2034 World Cup to Saudi Arabia amid widespread accusations of sports washing, and who has responded to formal ethics complaints with confident public statements while the tournament plays out around him. FIFA did not become trustworthy by surviving the 2015 scandal. It became better at managing perception. And perception management is exactly what is under pressure tonight. There is a version of this story where everything that happened in Kansas City was legitimate, where the challenge on Mandi genuinely did not meet the threshold for intervention under the rules as they stand, where the VAR team reviewed the footage with complete objectivity and reached the correct conclusion, where Messi's hat trick was the product of pure genius rather than any institutional favoritism. That version is possible. It might even be accurate, but the reason that version is so difficult for so many people to accept tonight is not because of what happened in the 41st minute. It is because of everything that happened before the 41st minute. The Ronaldo disciplinary decision, the Infantino Peace Prize, the FairSquare ethics complaint, the pattern of VAR controversies across multiple matches, the $9 billion commercial machine that depends on stars like Messi and Ronaldo remaining on the pitch and performing. All of that is the context that surrounds tonight's events and shapes how they are interpreted. And that context was not manufactured by Algeria or by critics of FIFA. That context was built by FIFA itself, one decision at a time, over the past decade. The argument that will follow this tournament, long after the trophy is lifted and the confetti settles, is not whether Messi is the greatest player who ever lived. That argument was resolved years ago in the minds of most serious football people. The argument is whether the institution that governs the sport he plays in is capable of treating him exactly like everyone else when the stakes are at their highest. In Kansas City tonight, the VAR screen stayed dark. The referee moved on. The hat trick was scored, the record was tied, and the question did not get answered. It got louder. What happens next matters enormously, not just for Algeria, not just for Argentina, but for the credibility of the sport itself. FIFA has a history of issuing carefully worded statements that acknowledge the appearance of controversy while deflecting any substantive accountability. If that is the response to tonight's events, it will be read as confirmation of exactly the suspicion the incident has generated. If FIFA instead chooses to address the officiating decision with real transparency, publishing the VAR logs, releasing the communication between the referee and the VAR team, explaining in concrete terms why the challenge did not meet the threshold for review, then at least the institution will have demonstrated a willingness to account for itself. That would be a departure from the pattern. The pattern says, do not hold your breath. There is something historically significant about the fact that this is happening at the 2026 World Cup, specifically. This tournament was built as the showcase event for a new era, a 48-team expansion, 3 host nations, matches from Vancouver to Miami to Mexico City, the most geographically ambitious sporting event ever staged. It was supposed to be the moment when FIFA demonstrated that it had learned from the disasters of the previous decade, that it could manage a tournament of this scale with transparency, fairness, and operational competence. Instead, it has delivered referee controversies starting from day one, a formal ethics complaint against its own president before the group stage was finished, VAR malfunctions, and now a match involving the sport's most iconic player that has produced the single most inflammatory officiating controversy of the entire tournament. The 2026 World Cup was supposed to rehabilitate FIFA's image,